Okay, welcome back everybody. Did you all enjoy the workshops? Yeah, we had some incredible people, so thank you all for sticking it out and collaborating with each other. I have a couple of PSAs before we get into the closing remarks. So the most important PSA is that for those of you that bought our reception ticket, it will be tonight at 9 p.m. at the SMFA downtown. Shuttles will be leaving here at 8:30, 8:45, and 9 p.m. Tickets, unfortunately, are sold out, but there is lots of beautiful places to dance and bars if you didn't get a ticket. So we hope you enjoy yourselves tonight. Tomorrow we will be having breakfast. It is 1,000% confirmed. Breakfast will start at 9 a.m. and then breakout workshops will be from 11 to 1 p.m. and we will make sure to tell you where those will be tomorrow morning here in Piper. I just want to take a second to acknowledge that this might be the last moment we are all in the same space. We have people flying out tonight and tomorrow morning. And I want to thank you for bringing your presence, your magic, your patience, and your curiosity. As we close today, I want to ground us in some gratitude and reflection. My name is Aaliyah Addie Everson. I am named after both of my grandmothers, who were the architects that imagined the future I am living today. Exactly 2 years ago, I sat in this room for the 2017 Black in Design. I was 22 at the time, aimless, grieving, and wondering what my next step would be. This conference gave me a spark of joy and purpose when I needed it the most. This conference changed me, and I am in awe of the privilege I have had to be on the team of this year's committee. Thank you to every single one of the other organizers who are my family. Can we take a chance to acknowledge everyone? Planning a conference as full-time students is certainly a journey, and we couldn't have done it without the staff, volunteers, and sponsors that have made this possible, as well as the amazing legacy of our past organizers who are here in the front row. Over the past 6 months, as the speaker chair, my role has allowed me to get to know and work with all the folks that you have heard from this weekend. And I am so grateful to all of you for bringing your vision and energy to this space. There's only so much that can be communicated through 10 email chains, and it's been really beautiful to see you all in the flesh. This conference has proven to me what is possible when we apply the radical imagination. The radical imagination is me standing here as the daughter of a formerly incarcerated person about to introduce a Black woman who is designing for decarceration at Harvard University. It is us challenging ourselves to think beyond what we have known and to trust what will be. It is an honor and a privilege to introduce you all to the force that is Deanna Van Buren. Slide. Okay. She is our closing keynote for the 2019 conference. Deanna Van Buren is the design director and co-founder of Designing Justice and Designing Spaces, DJDS, an architecture and real estate development nonprofit working to end mass incarceration by building infrastructure that attacks its root causes: poverty, racism, unequal access to resources, and the criminal justice system itself. Unlike the traditional adversarial and punitive architecture of justice, courthouses, prisons, and jails, the Oakland-based DJDS creates spaces and buildings for restorative justice, rehabilitation, and community building. Van Buren's most notable projects include Restore Oakland, a multi-use hub for restorative justice and workforce development in East Oakland, created in collaboration with the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights and Restaurant Opportunity Centers United, the Near West Side Peacemaking Center in Syracuse, New York, Pop-Up Village, a mobile event that brings a constellation of resources to under-resourced communities, and the Women's Mobile Refugee Center, a mobile overnight space for women who have recently been released from incarceration. A pioneering activist, Van Buren has been recognized internationally for her leadership in using architecture, design, and real estate innovations to address the social inequities behind the mass incarceration crisis. Her 2017 TED Women Talk on what a world without prisons could look like has been viewed more than 1 million times. And she is the only architect to have been awarded the Rauschenberg Artist as Activist Fellowship. Van Buren is also the recipient of UC Berkeley's prestigious 2018 Berkeley Rupp Architecture Prize and Professorship, which awards $100,000 biannually to a design practitioner who has made a significant contribution to advancing gender equity in architecture, and whose work emphasizes a commitment to sustainability and community. Van Buren received her BS in architecture from the University of Virginia and her MA from Columbia University. She is also an alumnus of the Loeb Fellowship here at Harvard Graduate School of Design. Please join me in welcoming Deanna Van Buren.
Oh my God, is this on? Can you all hear me? Yay, nice. Hi, good evening. Wow, it's been a long day. I'm glad to see you all are still here. I want to thank the African American Student Union for inviting me. I'm so grateful and honored that you have me here. Really, you're amazing. You're amazing. I also wanted to dedicate my talk tonight to Phil Freelon. The last time I saw Phil was at the Black in Design Conference, right? So what it tells you is about how important it is for us to come together. He encouraged me in my work at that time and was deeply kind, and I'm so grateful to him and his legacy. So I want to honor him with anything that I might say tonight, only the good parts, not the crazy parts. So what I'd like to do tonight is talk to you a little bit about the journey and the work, right? DJDS is kind of like an ideas shop. You know, some of the ideas don't make it, some of them do. We're not even that old, we're really only a few years old, so a lot of the work I'm showing is emergent. And I'm going to be showing you, this is only the second time in public I've talked about the framing of this around what we need to build to decarcerate. But I also want to start with how I got to that place and how we got to that place, because I think that one thing that's important is to really understand ourselves. Like, what are our values? What are our motivations? What journey have we each taken individually? Because that's what we bring to the work, right? Everything that I bring to the work is about the experience I had throughout my life. And I think this is where Black in Design is critical, right? The point of view that we bring is critical. We will not end the systems that are oppressing us if we're not able to contribute and find problem solve. So I want to show a little bit about that too, if you don't mind. So this was the beginning for me, right? I was about 5 years old when my family desegregated a neighborhood in rural Virginia. And what was incredible was sort of the hatred and the aggression from the white community, but also the Black community, right? And the sort of experience of being in the education system, and a system that was highly racist. And so my early beginnings were sort of an understanding of what my value was in society. And then in addition, my father used to tell me that there's another system I really needed to stay out of, and that was the criminal justice system. That it was not a system for people of color, and certainly not for women. And he would say it every time we went by this courthouse. And this is the Stafford County Courthouse where I grew up, very Jeffersonian architecture, like welcome to Virginia, this is what this stuff looks like. And I would cringe when I went by this building. I still feel uncomfortable inside of a courthouse, right? And so that was my image of justice, and I put it in the back of my mind as like, it's just not for me, right? There was so much that wasn't for me. But I went ahead and went to architecture school. I went to University of Virginia, and this picture is fuzzy because I'm old and stuff, but you know. And we were doing party-driven design, right? Very formal design process. And I got a strong education. But then I went to Columbia, right? And we were doing this. We were doing blobs. And I went to Bernard Schumi, and I was like, you know, I don't want to make blobs. I don't want to design cities in China. I have never been to China. I was like, why don't we work down the road in Harlem, right? Why can't I serve people who live in the community next to us? And he told me, Deanna, you're in the wrong school. You should go to Yale, as if Yale was doing that. But that was his response, right? That was his response. And so I did that thing I did with my father. I pushed it to the back, right? That it's not possible. this is not for me. And so fortunately, I left the United States. I was like, I'm gonna take it to the next level. And I moved to Europe and I started to design shopping centers, right? I designed shopping centers all over the world, working for some of the largest developers in the world, Bovis Lend-Lease, Australand, the Tan family out of China, the Alguer family in the Middle East, right? And what I was starting to learn about was how to design for culture. Yes, it was a shopping center, but I was really embedded in these cultural conditions around the world and started for the first time to think about culture and how does it manifest in our built environment. And so in Australia, albeit in China, it was a powerful experience, and I, as a Black woman, was given the opportunity to be a design director, an associate design director. I was getting opportunities that I wasn't able to get at that time in the US. And so I came back to the US in about 2005 and continued to work for institutions, for wealthy people. I was doing homes for wealthy people, and I was starting to ask a lot of questions. And one of the big ones was, why am I doing this? What is the purpose of this work? I never saw anybody that looked like me. I was never working for anybody from my family, my community, and it was starting to bother me, right? I was starting to be like, we have to ask questions about the kind of projects that we were doing, right? What happens to those people when we build in that place? They're being displaced. People didn't know what I did. And so I started to do a little thing like I had a side hustle, like the side hustle does. So I had a full-time job, and I started to do installations for people who did look like me. And I started to do that with another architect you may know, Liz Ogbu, and a contractor. We're doing design build projects for various organizations. We built installations for Latina fashion designers in New York. We started to design for filmmakers who are filming the lives of people all over the world. And we did an installation where we created small rooms for them so you could be immersed in their life no matter where they are and watch a video of their lives. We started to work with low-income communities, mainly youth who are poets, and like, how do you create a place to celebrate their poetry? And I was starting to feel alive, right? I was starting to feel like the stuff I was doing mattered. And so I did that wonderful moment where I quit my job. Yay! It was a good moment. It was a good moment. But I'm going to be honest with y'all, I had something to fall into. Okay? It was this, right? I got a job designing a video game. Who plays video games? Anybody a video game? Anybody ever played The Witness? You should play it, it's so good. I worked 5 years on this game, so for 5 years, I built a world, right? I built a world, and building worlds for video game industry pays you to look at things like this, right? So I was able to work part-time and commit myself to doing the thing my father told me not to do, was I became drawn back into how would we start to address the issue of mass incarceration. And the reason why is that I think we incarcerate more of our citizens than any country in the entire world. About 2 million we have 2 million incarcerated and 7 million under some form of carceral control, probation, parole, in prison, or in jail. And what has been most disturbing is the impact it's having on Black and brown communities, right? 1 in 3 Black men can find themselves incarcerated in their lifetime, and the impact it's having on families is they can't even meet their basic needs for food, for shelter. We have multiple generations of mass incarceration, destroying and obliterating communities as we invest in the criminal justice infrastructure and completely divest in communities as we see a renewed form of slavery. Disgusting, right? And devastating. So, one thing I learned during this time, and y'all probably know this, but it took me a little while to really get it, that if we believe that a certain kind of person is less than, if we are bigoted, if we believe in hatred, if we believe in punishment, the values and the things that we literally think become concrete, right? They become we build them. We build racism into our cities. And it was becoming very deepening for me that we had to be very careful about what we believed, and we had damn sure be careful about what we built. And we have to ask questions as designers and architects. How are we participating in perpetuating a belief systems that become amplified and exacerbate existing conditions well past our lifetime? And when I looked at how architects were participating in the system, this is what we were doing. We were building the infrastructure to prop up a system that represented a set of values that I was not aligned with. And while I'm not saying that creating better conditions for those who are incarcerated is not appropriate, there was something wrong for me about making better and prettier boxes to house Black and brown bodies. That this is not where our efforts needed to go. And so the question, I get asked this question all the time. So Deanna, what do we build instead of this? And to be honest, I could not really answer that question for a long time. I didn't know. I really didn't know. And then I remember the moment, like it was a specific moment in time. You know, you have those like specific moments in times. It was 2006, it was Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, and I was at the Taylor Memorial Methodist Church in West Oakland, newly back to the United States, wanting to celebrate my culture. And I'm in this hot church, and Fanya Davis and Angela Davis, great activists, stood up and they talked to me about restorative justice. I had never heard of it before. Has anyone heard of restorative justice? I know, yay, look at that crowd. Woo, woo. Well, I'm gonna just say what it is real quick, for those of you who don't. So they talked about a justice system that was old, right? One that had been around a very long time. And that it was a philosophy, really, that said that when a harm has been done, a crime has been committed, it is a breach of relationship. And that the needs of those who've been harmed are critical. They must be addressed. It is not a crime against the state. Real people have been harmed, and those who have done it have an obligation to make amends. They are accountable for those acts, which in our current system, there's no room for that. And that these groups come together to address the conduct, to create a plan for the person who committed the harm, to make amends and potentially return to their community unstigmatized. And you know these processes. These are the Truth and Reconciliation Courts of South Africa, the Gacaca Courts of Rwanda, Fumble Talk in Sierra Leone, victim offender mediation, family group conferencing. And what was happening is DAs and prosecutors were starting to divert cases out of court into restorative justice, so people had no record, they didn't have to touch the justice system at all, and that folks who had been survivors of severe violence were choosing this. 95% are choosing this process over the punitive model, and that we're seeing a reduction in violent reoffending, right? So the outcomes of the process were successful, and it was an eighth of the cost. And so my question was like, why aren't we designing for this system? What is the role of the designer in actually bringing forth social structures and systems that are for us, right? That are about healing, that are about reparation? What would that look like? So it's another question that started to sit on my heart. And so I did the thing architects do. I fell into the trap, right, of form making. And I did this stuff here at Harvard, right? Where else are you gonna do it? I was here, I was like, I'm gonna make these beautiful forms. I called these mediation wombs, and I was really proud of myself, right? This is what restorative justice looks like. And at the same time, I got a call from a social worker who invited me to a prison, Chester Prison. I went to a prison for the first time, outside of Philadelphia. And what she asked me to do, and what we created, was the first design studio. I believe it is the very first design studio, looking at the intersection of restorative justice and design, connecting with those who have been both victimized and who have harmed others. And it was through that process that I started to learn and understand what it would look like to design for restorative justice. We were asking our students questions like, what kind of environment would you need to address the harm that you had done? We brought in pieces of paper. You can't bring X-Acto blades into the prison, right? So it was like, we used all the tools that we use by just using paper, right? So this toolkit we started to create through this curriculum. We also taught soft skills, right? How to work in teams, how to present your work, skills that when people would be able to return, they could use, right? And they were able to express themselves and talk about what they want to do for the real design and building of things inside of the institution. And I have to say it was really one of the most profound and influential experiences of my life. I started to understand the system and its impacts very deeply. And the things that they were creating were beautiful. And they may look rough to you, but really all they have was paper. And I've seen them use their own urine and paper, soften it to make glue. Like the things they would make are incredible, incredible. Spaces for victim offender to come together, spaces for a community center for wellness and reconciliation where their families could come and where they could live. Ideas that we had not even thought about, like what do you build instead? You build this, you build this. And so I knew that it was a good creative tool. We knew we were developing wisdom, but what I was surprised about was the therapeutic impacts of what we were doing. So I'm sitting in a studio, and this has happened on more than one occasion inside of a prison or jail, where men will start to cry, right? They're starting to process real feelings in real time. So that what we need to know is that the design process can have therapeutic outcomes and benefits. It's amazing. It's amazing. Know that you can do that. It also meant I needed to get a little additional training because I realized I was starting to ignite things that I was not trained to hold. And I was glad to have a social work with me, so I did some training. I also became a circle keeper. I took those classes here at Lesley University. You know, Lesley, it's like over there. You may not pay any attention to it, but they were doing peacemaking circle training. So I went over there and I did that. And so the work of many of our students at San Quentin have been shown in the Cooper Hewitt Museum and has been traveling around the country. We also are starting to work and getting the curriculum onto digital tools so that we can, instead of just hundreds of men and women a year, we can reach thousands. And so the impact of a tool, just the tool of engagement, has been tremendous. So what I want to show you is what we learned from all of that. And this is maybe the second time I've talked about this in public, is what is the infrastructure that we need to build for mass decarceration? I'm going to show you 3 types of projects: restorative investments in community, restorative reentry infrastructure, and the repurposing and reimagining of existing criminal justice infrastructure. And again, many of this is emergent. We are learning every single day. And frankly, what I'm showing you today, I really want to elicit your help in joining me because the amount of work is overwhelming. And frankly, I need your help. I need your help. So to start, we'll do restorative reinvestments, which is my favorite. I have to say it's my favorite part. And it's really where we started, right? So the idea that we build an infrastructure to divert people out of prison altogether, right? That's the goal. That system is sticky. Once you touch it, it's hard to shake it off. So we want to keep people out of the system altogether. And so, simple thing, right? This is the first little thing that I ever did. It was this dirty classroom in East Oakland. They were setting up restorative justice program so that young people would not be suspended or expelled, and they were coming into peacemaking. And so all I had was like my little pro bono time, you know, and I got some free carpet and paint and got some IKEA lights, and that was it, right? Right, super simple. But what it did, created an environment of respect and dignity, and the program itself started to see different kind of results in this space than when they were being pushed elsewhere, right? And the success of the program around the creation of a dedicated space for that practice proved to be very powerful. And we were able to create a set of guidelines that we've been able to share with schools all over the country on how to create these spaces themselves through this sort of democratization of design, right? We want people to use the tools that we know to create environments to facilitate and support their lives and the programs that they have. And so we stepped up a little bit. I started to harass a group in New York called the Center for Court Innovation, right? Like calling them day and night, because I had heard they had a program where they were bringing Native American peacemaking practices into a non-Native community for the very first time in Syracuse, New York, in the near West Side. Very low-income community, richly diverse, right? Black and brown folks, a lot of immigrants coming from overseas, fleeing persecution, and they were setting up this program where DA and prosecutors would move quality of life crimes into the community where elders in the community would be the ones moderating that. So they were training elders and they were moving it through, and at the same time, I was working with the community using my Circle Keeper training to figure out, what does a peacemaking center even look like? I mean, who's been in a prison or jail or a courthouse? Raise your hand if you've been in one of those places, right? Who's been in a peacemaking center? I usually have one. Yeah, there's usually 1 or 2 people. So I didn't know what they look like, right? I had no idea. And so the Circle process allowed us to get an idea of what a space for peacemaking might be in that community. And at the same time, I was able to help train the community on what peacemaking was, right? So we love to stack functions. Every move we make has 3 objectives, both to get the understanding of what it is, but also to train. So my client was pretty pleased because both things were happening at the same time. And half of that was just figuring out where it should go, right? Peacemaking has to happen on neutral territory, and finding neutral ground is very challenging and takes some time. In addition, restorative justice and peacemaking is hyper-local, right? A half mile is too far, right? This is downtown. We love to take all our justice infrastructure and cram it downtown. And it's horrible, right? People can't get there. right? If you have to see your probation officer and you can't get downtown Frida, you might end up right back in again. And restorative justice is a community-driven process. And so it had to be super local. So we finally found a site, and it was an old drug house that had been partially renovated by Marion Wilson, who's an local artist, and we were able to take it and implement all the things that we learned from the community into this space. It opened about 2 years ago. And what's happening is that people are coming to the space for the first time, and they're making a different choice, right? The Center for Court Innovation was like, we want to do maybe 10 cases a year, but they ended up doing over 80. They've done hundreds of these cases now. Because what happens is people come in and they know that this is something different, right? There's communicating a different set of values, and they are choosing peacemaking. They are choosing it. And they're coming here now rather than even call the police because they know I have a place to go. Right? So the reality is that place-based responses, right, this program in place simultaneously in development foments the movement, right? It grounds it. And so the power of place is something that we've started to see and be able to believe and have outcomes that are really expanding beyond anything that I ever thought was possible. So at this point, I understood that we could at least start to explain, like, this is the kind of qualities of restorative justice and peacemaking, right? We need cool-off spaces. We need protected space. We need activated lobbies. You have to have a kitchen. Hospitality is critical to peacemaking. And so we were starting to look at global examples and our own experience to be able to share this with folks, right? That spaces have to have embedded nature, right? It has to be deeply integrated. You always need to be able to modulate fight, flight, and freeze response through looking at nature through the window, through dynamic and biophilic integration of what you're seeing. We needed to look at the scale of our justice architecture, right? And when we see it against the punitive model, it's so clear, right? If you look at the image at the top, on the left is our Alameda County Courthouse. And like, this is how we start to perceive and replicate and mirror the values of a different kind of system. Right, so that we were able to give people an example of what to build instead. So it was around this time that I realized just thinking at the scale of the building was not enough, right? That we had to start to replicate and think a little bit bigger and a little faster. And so one of the things that I started to ask, another question was, it's great to design for restorative justice, but how do we design for restorative economics? And it was at this point I actually started designing justice, so I started a second company. And this company started to include both the visioning and the aesthetic pieces of infrastructure, of the architecture, but we also started to do the financing, right? So this is when we became developers. Knowing that we needed to start to stack the functions again, right? To layer things, because how do you pay for this infrastructure? Right? How do we get the money to build it? We are totally outside the system, y'all. Like, we're not using tax dollars to pay for stuff. There's no procurement process. We are literally going, like, we need to make an entirely new infrastructure that we don't even know how to pay for yet. And so we had to become two things. And we needed to figure out how to divest from the criminal justice infrastructure and invest in this new restorative infrastructure. And so one of the ideas we started to play out, and we're starting to see it get picked up, so it's very exciting, is the idea of the restorative justice city. And we came up with the idea for a restorative justice city reinvestment tool. And it came out of an inspiration from Prison Fellowships International that wrote a paper saying, what would it look like if a city of 1 million people used restorative justice as the primary way of addressing harm in their community? Right? Beautiful paper, not a piece of architecture in it, right? Like, well, you got to build a ton of stuff for that, you know? And so it was like, what does that look like? This is the way that we can be thinking about the future now. We also were inspired by the Justice Mapping Center, who did the $1 Million Blocks project. You may know them with Laura Kurgan and Center for Spatial Research at Columbia University. The fact that we could use data to figure out where we were investing and where we needed to disinvest. So we teamed up with them and with the Detroit Justice Center to start to develop a concept for this reinvestment tool. And what it would do, it was map city-level data over grassroots data, neighborhoods collecting their own data and empowering themselves by saying, this is what we need in our community. And it would be teamed up with a participatory budgeting training so that they would be able to do that. And the idea is we would go neighborhood by neighborhood, and it would be an app, like an active and dynamic map that would be able to tell you where it was, where the money was going, and where it needed to flow. All right, so this is a long-term project and idea in the office that was funded by the Autodesk Foundation, and we are trying to push forward in Detroit. But it began in Oakland, right, my hometown. And what I did was convene the police, I had the county in there, I had the city, I had some of the country's leaders in restorative justice, and we're like, what would it look like for Oakland to become the first restorative justice city in the United States? What would we need to build? What would we need to make? And so we came up with this sort of map of these action domains, different parts of our society that would have to be addressed, everything from economic justice to food justice to restorative justice. And some of the things that came out of this, and this is one that I really am most passionate about, is using art and design in the public realm. You know, we talked a little bit about it today, but in my personal belief is that there is no future for us if we don't heal from the past. Right? We can talk about the interpersonal conflicts that we have, but they are essentially often rooted in a larger structural system. And so how do we do that? Every country has this issue. It's not just the United States, right? How do we use art and design in the public realm in order to heal? Heal from the legacies of slavery, heal from genocide, heal from war. It's critical. And it's really going to take all of us to figure out how to do that. And these are some inspiring projects, and my hope is to be able to do this myself. But in the meantime, we were believing that design also has impact. And out of this came a map called Corridors Oakland of Resources, right? That we would be able to distribute a network of resources through the flatlands of Oakland, where life expectancy is 15 years less than those living in the hills. And they would be tied into existing infrastructure, and these sort of glowing pieces would be these sort of justice, multi-use justice hubs, right? Great pie in the sky idea, you know, this is great. But the amazing thing was, out of it came a prototype. Out of it came Restore Oakland, the country's first center for restorative justice and restorative economics. And I'm going to show this project in both real and renderings because it just opened, right? It just opened about a month ago. It's very, very exciting. And so what we were able to do is we helped our client find the site, right? We knew the site needed to house a whole constellation of uses, right? So this co-location multi-use hub prototype is critical. We've got to work across sectors, right? From restorative justice to economic justice to food justice, all in the same place, so we can cross-pollinate ideas and programs and practices. So we were able to locate a site for them. We helped them buy and negotiate the purchase and sale, and did full architectural services. And we gutted this building. And on the ground floor is a restaurant that trains low-wage restaurant workers to get living wage jobs in fine dining. It's not open yet, so here's the rendering, but it really does look like this. It looks great. And come in a couple weeks, it'll be done. And it has the country's largest fine dining training kitchen, right? So a lot of formerly incarcerated people are able to come here. They accept into their program to break the racial divide in the restaurant industry. Because what we know is that front of house jobs and fine dining and chef, there are almost as many of those jobs as tech jobs in the Bay Area, and across the country, these jobs are on the increase, and you can make a living wage. You can make a 6-figure salary doing that, and it's always white guys up at the front, and all the black and brown people are in the back earning minimum wage. It's disgusting. And so the idea is that this is the restorative economics hub for this, with Restaurant Opportunity Centers United that has a restaurant in Detroit. They have a restaurant in New York, and this is their first West Coast restaurant. At the top floor is a community organizing facility for the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights and Kausahusta Just Cause, immigrant rights, tenant rights, and focused on ending mass incarceration. So they're all co-located upstairs. And it also has the county's first dedicated spaces for restorative justice. So youth ages 15 to 21 are getting diverted out of court into this space. That is all that happens here is peacemaking, and they're able to double their caseload. Right, so the real fomenting of these things all co-locating in the same place has been already hugely impactful, and they've just opened. And so what came out of this is a process, right? We call it the concept development process. This process is the core of our services and what we do. So it involves design, an aesthetic vision, working deeply in the community. We also work around policy and finance and program. These 4 things have to happen, we believe, at the same time in order to build the infrastructure that we really need. Much of this we have in-house. I also hired a community organizer on staff, so the staff started to look a little funky at DJDS. You know, we got like a community organizer, we have a graphic designer, we got architects, we have a real estate developer, and then working with policy folks. What we're able to do is create a document that we've been able to take $170,000 in philanthropic investment and turn it into over 21 million, right? So we're able to leverage that to build that infrastructure, right? And all it is, y'all, is a feasibility study, right? But in a community that has no resources to be able to provide that. That's how they get access to big dollars, right? So this is an equity game that we're in, and we're trying to play. And so the thing that's been happening, Restore Oakland has ignited all these replications, right? So where we're starting to replicate it is in Detroit with the Love Building. I don't know if you know Allied Media Projects, the Detroit Justice Center, the Detroit Disability Powered, the Detroit Narrative Agency, and Mama Neza, like amazing organizers, all in this hub. We've helped them to raise money, the millions of dollars that they need. We're doing it right now. I think we just closed the deal on that now, so they have the money to renovate this place. We did a full engagement process, came up with a master plan for them. It's gonna be amazing. And the exciting thing from my organization's perspective is that because of the relationships that were built there, we are now in a position to purchase land, right? So we will finally become real estate developers ourselves and develop an entire social justice campus that will have reentry facilities, workforce development, housing for women who are in emergencies as they get reenter from prison and jail. So there'll be an entire network of these social justice campuses that we can have all over the place. And this is what we build instead of prisons, right? This is how it gets done. So I'm hoping we have the purchase and sale agreement, and we hope to buy that property soon and begin a massive community engagement process to figure out what should go here. Another project that we are super excited about is the new West Jackson Cooperative. I don't know if anyone knows these folks. They're amazing, right? We're looking at a community of 500 people. They bought 60 homes in this area, very low income. Almost 100% of this community has been justice involved, 100%. And so what we'll be doing is working with them to develop a master plan and many properties on their site that they own. So this is a cooperative. The community owns this land, right? But they don't know how to develop it. And if they're not careful, they could lose it, right? They could lose it. And so what will happen here is both another Center for Restorative Justice and Restorative Economics, many social enterprises. We've got at least 30 formerly incarcerated men and women who will be able to come here. They'll be able to live here and then stay here as they move from transitional to permanent housing and have jobs on site. And so this project will also kick off and is a new model for us and another one of those sort of emergent projects that we're really excited about in terms of replicating these models. So the second prototype we need to build. So we talked about restorative reinvestments. Reentry is critical if we want to be successful, right? We're changing policy to let people out, and they have nowhere to live, they have no job, they end up homeless, and they come right back in, right? So this is where our role is critical to be right out front, right? If we're going to change policy, we need to be able to have the infrastructure to support the policy changes. And so one of the things that we've been very concerned about is the intersectionality between the criminal justice system, homelessness, the foster care system, right? Like 80% of those at San Quentin have had some contact with the foster care system, right? So we're starting to look at the intersectionality around systems and what the reality of that is and how we're going to have to start to address all of these populations if we want to cut the pipeline and keep people from recidivating. So one thing that we've started to do in the face of mass gentrification is work with Black churches. Black churches are asset rich and cash poor, right? People are being pushed out and they have resources that can be developed. It can be challenging to work with Black churches, I ain't gonna lie, God love them. But this is one of them that we are working with. And we, again, always work closely with program partners, right? So we love to partner. We love to partner with community organizers and folks who are deeply embedded in community. Building opportunities for self-sufficiency is delivering massive reentry programming. And so they're critical to the success of this project. And so the project that we've been developing that emerged is a church that has an old charter school. It's been sitting there vacant for 15 years. This is classic, right? They got the property and it's just sitting there. And so we're able to work with them on turning this into a reentry facility for 50 formerly incarcerated men. And what's happening is we're changing laws in California that people are coming out on early release. In early release, they're mandated to live in some sort of transitional housing for up to 2 years. This housing is disgusting, right? They're crammed into rooms, sometimes 5 to 10 in these spaces. I was just in one. There's no privacy. Many of my former students actually from San Quentin are coming back. They're getting robbed. There's like a whole level of stress, and they literally have thousands of barriers to success. Not hundreds, thousands of barriers to success successful reentry. And so the Center of Hope Church is sort of supporting the spiritual anchor. There's sort of BOSS is supporting the programmatic anchor, and the environment is supporting their health, well-being, and wellness. We always embed social enterprise into our projects. So this is a front-facing cafe where they'll get trained as baristas, and also invites the community in, right? Because the first thing when you bring reentry in, people are like, I don't want those people in my neighborhood, right? I don't want them there. Right, so this sort of creating a sort of space of interface where they can meet their families. Family reintegration is critical, where they can be able to see that, you know, these folks are from this community, they are not that different from you and I, and that they're really part of this, right? So that was an important piece of the project. And so you start to have multiple spaces and layers of services, programming, they can get therapy there, there's a gym there, we have a fab lab that's coming in, so that there's a multiplicity of programs and spaces. And what came out of this was a whole other project, right? So this is the other thing about the concept development process. I just don't know what you're going to get, right? We can start it, but I don't know what's going to come out of it. And what came out of it was this idea that had to do with cost of construction, privacy and dignity, and it was an idea for what we're calling mobile refuge rooms, right? So rather than have 10 people in a room, just like bunk bed style, how could we create sort of a pop-up room that would provide them that privacy? And so it turns out that people liked the idea. And we were able to work with a group of formerly incarcerated men and women to design this room, and then also to fabricate it, working with a local community college so that those who were going to be living there also were getting living wage jobs and learning digital fabrication, right? So we want to stack functions, and again, in everything we do. So it was both a training to do it, and also designing to do it, and then a place to live. And so the exciting thing that's happened, and I think this is going to work, or not, it's a video. Okay, maybe it won't work. But I appreciate, oh no, it works, woo, look at that. That this room is a set of boxes that rolls in and pops up to create. So it gets deployed in the same way it gets assembled. The Murphy bed comes up, the pieces slide into the boxes, and they move off, and you can roll them away, and they can be tucked away, right? So that's how that works. And the crazy thing, y'all, is we just had the rendering, and the Alameda County Department of Probation is like, I'll take 15. Wow. Immediately, I'll take 15. Because the desperation and the need for that is clear, right? So this is just a simple solution, a design solution to a problem they have. And now, with our homelessness situation, they're starting to look at it for unhoused populations. And what's created now is another social enterprise spinoff. Right? And how do we develop a program that's just for formerly incarcerated folks to be able to come in and learn digital fabrication through the creation of this model, right? So that's the restorative economics piece of the work. So, I'm tired. So, repurposing and reimagining, right? This is the third piece of the work that we're starting to look at. So one of the issues, y'all, is, and it's good, right? It's a good problem, is we're starting to close these things down, right? So this is like, be careful what you build, because you got to deal with it later. And we're starting to see all over the country, jails are closing down, activists are pushing to close down everything. Right? And we're right behind them, right next to them, helping them to do it, right? And that can be done, you know, you can do this by just going into community and helping them re-envision something else. Super helpful. It's a great way to fight municipalities around this issue. So this is a new prototype in our office. And this one's particularly interesting because it's working with the American Welding Center, Miller, right? So we start to form and locate issues. And the issues is that we have hundreds of gaps in jobs in the welding industry and in the trades, right? There's just not enough jobs to do that. The need for the jobs and the locations of the jobs happen to be mapped and coincide with the closing of jails and prison infrastructure, right? And this infrastructure is actually great for welding schools, right? So it's sort of a natural fit. And they are looking to do 50 to 100 of these welding schools in the next 10 years, right? So the idea, this pilot is in Beaumont, Texas, where we will turn this what was a youth detention facility into a welding school, right? So it's both a reentry space, but also training folks in welding where they'll have jobs when they get out. So we're meeting a need in the marketplace, and using the dying infrastructure. Because if we don't use the dying infrastructure quickly, there are economic impacts in the local community, and I'll tell you right now what happens is ICE just turns them into immigrant detention facilities. We've seen it happen many, many times. So the speed is important and critical, and there are hundreds of these facilities. So help me out here, people. We need to get in there and start to do that. And so another project, I'll be flying from here to Atlanta to try to deal with this ugly thing, which is a 500,000 square foot jail in their downtown. During the Olympics, they swept up the streets and threw thousands of people, into this facility. Local community organizers, the Racial Justice Action Center, and Women on the Rise, who are mostly formerly incarcerated women of color, have fought the mayor's office and fought the city to close this thing down. Right now, there are only 100 people left inside this facility. It's costing them $33 million a year to operate it. And this is happening in a lot of places. And I also, just so you know, in Framingham, locally, that is also happening here, right? So we're starting to see that. The mayor's office finally agreed that, yes, we need to close this facility down. And so why I'm excited about this project is I believe this is the model that we are going to be seeing and trying to replicate around the country, where you have community organizers, you have a cooperation and transparency with city government. We are coming in to do a vast community engagement process. Like, I'm a little scared. I mean, it's the whole city of Atlanta that we're supposed to engage around what they think this place should be, and they're calling it a center for equity. So we will be developing models, financial models. We will be developing an aesthetic vision for the project. We often create a brand for the project. And working with the mayor's office and community organizers around the city is how it's going to happen, given they're changing the policies to let people out. At the same time, we're looking at the design. So it's like this multifaceted piece that we're looking to replicate also with the Vera of Institute of Justice. If you know them out of New York, they're a policy and think tank, and we're going to be replicating this process all over the country. So this is a very exciting initiative, and how we design a process, right? You can design a building, but if you can design a process that's replicable, you can achieve scale. So I'll end with this project, which is a favorite, and it's weird, but cool. This is a project that's like, we came up with, right? Like, this is the sort of thing, like, you're sitting around the table and you come up with the idea, and like 4 years later, you're like, oh my God, be careful what you come up with, because you'll end up with something like this, which requires I have an entire operations team. But it was in response to this, right? The complete disinvestment in our communities of color. Like, where do you begin? They can't get access to resources. There were no resources coming into the community. And this is like right near, not far from Google. It's so gross, right? The disparity is intense. And so what we were finding is that people couldn't get to resources because they couldn't cross gang territory for fear of being shot, right? So that's a real danger. There was nobody's invested in these communities, no public transport. People can't afford a car. Who's going to take care of my kids, right? They can't get access to school and resources. So it emerged out of a conversation with a local group that was trying to get people education, and people weren't able to get there. And so the idea was like, I was like, you know, could we create a whole village on wheels that brings all the stuff to them, like brings the restorative justice, brings food, brings all the things, and activates these blighted sites so we can get access to more people faster, quicker, while we catalyze permanent development. And it turns out we can. And so we did 2 years of community engagement on this thing. Like, what should it look like? Where should it go? We developed a brand with folks, you know, figuring out what this constellation needed to be and how it needed to work. And right now, we're popping up in the Bayview's Hunters Point, which is in San Francisco, South San Francisco, in West Oakland and East Oakland. And so it moves, right? It's complicated when things move. It's easier when they stay in place, but it's achieving the goals that we intended. And the thing that's in the village is it's not a farmer's market, right? It's a village, and it has to have all the parts in the village, right? So it's gonna have a barber, you know, there's arts and culture and performance going on. You can get AIDS testing. We're about to do a whole pregnancy van for expectant mothers coming up. There's a whole place for youth, right? And at the end of the day, my firm is just the little design build operations piece, right? And we had to learn a ton about how to support and create a constellation of programming. And so the things that we do, this is the stuff, right? We make the stuff, we deploy the stuff, and we design the environment, and the environments need to be therapeutic, right? Design matters, and we're actually creating environments that are unique and beautiful in their context, even though they might only be up for 2 days or 5 hours. People come and they're spending time there. and they're spending the whole time there. And they get mad when the thing isn't there, right? It's like once a month. And so part of the stuff that we create are pop-up shops, and the pop-up shops are used to support micro-entrepreneurs in the community so that they can generate revenue and income. The pop-up shops are loved by our vendors, right? They're similar to the rooms, like they're small pieces. We're able to roll them away and show up. These are not the white tents you see. Like everything, almost all the pieces are customized. So it's a unique high-end environment, everything from the signage to sunshades, everything. So that when you come here, there's like turf on the ground. We have trees and planter, grocery carts, like the whole thing shows up and creates a place that people are able to relax and feel safe in. We also have been taking buses. This seems to be the thing everyone thinks the only thing we do is take buses and turn them into other things. But we took a bus and we did strip it out and we turned it into a classroom. And the classroom brings GED and high school education to formerly incarcerated people in their communities of care. And you know, I don't know if you all ever plan to do vehicles, but let me tell you, you can't get a regular contractor to do this situation. I am very grateful I live in the land of Burning Man. Does anyone know Burning Man? Has anyone been to Burning Man? Oh, yeah. So I got some burners, right? These guys know how to trick out an art car, and that's what we did, right? We gutted it. We were able to work with them. We used Rhino, and we sort of used CNC milling to fit out the whole interior of the bus. And it serves 15 students and a teacher. And the crazy town thing is like, I was like, you know, nobody's gonna go to school on this bus, we're crazy. But it turns out people are pulling themselves out of the bricks and mortar site to go to school on this bus. If the bus doesn't show up, they don't go to school. I can't believe it, right? It's been a huge success, and it's so instead of losing students, they're now able to serve an extra few thousand students a year as it moves around the Bay, and it anchors the village with educational resources. A second vehicle that we did was requested by incarcerated women who were being released from jail in the middle of the night. We lost a woman the other day. You know, they are brought back into their pimps and drug dealers waiting for them. They know they're coming out, right? So they don't really have a chance. They're coming out in the clothes that they were arrested in. And so I spent a week inside of the San Francisco County Jail working with 60 women to figure out what needed to be there, right? What do you need? I don't know, right? I don't know anything about what you need. And so they told me, and we did some robust stuff. We built models, we did all kinds of things. And what they told us were they needed these things, right? I thought they were gonna need beds. They did not want beds. They did not want beds. They wanted recliners, oddly enough. They wanted recliners. And they wanted to be able to connect with their family and resources. They wanted to like just change their clothes and like do their hair, right? Some simple stuff, right? Just be treated like a human being, get a little food. And so we were able to do that. We took a Wind River trailer and we got the Burning Man people again and helped us to gut it. This was from the African American ones this time. Like, you guys got to diversify your Burning Man crew. This trailer is also going to be serving survivors of sex trafficking. We have a huge sex trafficking issue in Oakland, and this will be there as a space of refuge for the women. They can get their nails done, which is what they want, you know, and there's like a whole range of things, and meet with a caseworker and literature if they like. Another thing that, you know, we've been very interested in is fabrication and pattern making and design with the women, so we were able to do that. I was able to fabricate and make over 300 yards of fabric based on their designs using hand stamping and printing, and that was used on the interiors of the vehicle, right? So they helped sew it, so I brought it back to them, and they sewed the pillows and the curtains, and so part of that is like, you need to be able to see yourself in the environments that you're in, right? And as a designer, like just being able to get in there and make whatever you can, right? I'm not a welder, you know? I've tried, but I can't do it very well. But you know, we can create other things, right? And help people have a hand in the things that we do. And so this vehicle is completed recently and it's on the road. So outcomes, they're amazing. They're really a shocking surprise. That the business development that's happened amongst those who are in the village has been incredible. More relationships are being built. We have host partners where, like a cooperative grocery store where people are now selling their things in the grocery store. So this is what it's ignited. We've also had increased access to social services that people never got before because they're in an unstigmatizing environment. There's been economic opportunity that vendors are starting to make more money. We also have, you know, placemaking is this term, like we don't really use that in the community. I'm just using it with y'all's because you all know what placemaking is. We call it placekeeping. And starting to build the social and economic wealth of the community, that people are coming here and they're feeling safe, and it's replacing a lot of that's been taken away. It's why they're upset when it's not here. So I'll show you this video. It tells the story better than me. So that's the village. That's the village. And the village lives on. We're developing relationships with UCSF, which is a local university, and Bridge Housing, as a collaborative effort to bring this to many, many more communities. So I always like to close with the Cornel West quote, which maybe some of you have heard me say, that, I want you to really, I hope, join me and think about what a justice that's rooted in love looks like, right? Just imagine that future for our people and for all of us, and that the role that we have to play in breaking down social systems and envisioning an alternative, we are critical to that, and we have to lead. We cannot respond. So be leaders with me, and I think we'll see some significant change. Thank you.